Brain bugs, frankly, I find the idea of a bug that thinks offensive.
The brain bug was the evil, emperor of the bug world. I guess the chip or the CPU, as everybody kind of thought.
And the moment you see it go up, you go slowly down and then move out. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Paul, from the very beginning, was very insistent that it be very offensive to everybody. Its mouth had, or whatever it was supposed to look like something. Paul would say, well, perhaps it should look like a vagina, or perhaps it should look like an anus, but I don't know. And so we ended up calling this the face or the structure of this thing, the poogina. That was our characterization of it.
It seems like in retrospect, everybody's kind of blaming everybody else, How did that thing end up looking like a giant, whatever that is, But at the time, it was a little bit of, everybody was there, and it was sometimes, this part here could be a bit more, perhaps.
Early on, Paul was saying, well, it's like a Lovecraft thing, like this horrible Cthulhu type. It's the god of the insect people.
A lot of the inspiration was drawn from some of the earlier film noir movies, such as Touch of Evil, Orson Welles' character, or some of these guys, kind of a corpulent, over big boss. So we started with that idea, kind of a cross between, say, Orson Welles and a giant grub. Kind of a huge, overweight, soft, really not so functional type bug. So we quickly established an overall kind of scale. It's got to be a big, imposing kind of a character. Started getting some of the disgusting aspects of it worked out. It's a soft, kind of pulpy thing with rippling waves to kind of simulate thought or the thought process or some kind of organic process going on there. Multiple eyes, again, kind of a spider type, attribute there. Some feeder claws and miscellaneous little claws, to help kind of keep himself clean and tend to him. And then ultimately the mouth, which the palp extends from. The palp, obviously, is the device that's used to kind of poke you in the brain and suck all your knowledge out. It
had a lot of unusual kind of staging because a lot of the people basically get thrown onto the ground. You go to see the king, well, you gotta kneel, right? So the brain bug has a kind of a similar treatment. You don't just stand in front of the brain bug, you're on the ground. So that meant that, well, if these people are gonna be kneeling and stuff, we have to play some of the stuff a little bit differently. We gotta play the face a little bit closer to the ground. It doesn't have to be armored, it's not that kind of thing. It's a brain, so it's very soft, can hardly even move itself around. He's too big, in fact, to really transfer much, right? So he's carried on a carpet. When you saw those chariot bugs, then you knew that the king was coming. So that's how the sequences begin.
In trying to implement this character, we went through a maquette phase where we would create something like this, talk to Paul when it's in a rough stage, say, well, what do you think about this? We'd kind of get down low, look at it, say, well, is that going to be disgusting enough and everything like that. And once that design has been finalized, this piece then, for instance, is put onto a digitizing arm, kind of like a 3D pantograph, and we pick points off the surface, enter them into the computer to create, ultimately, a wireframe computer model. It's not too complex. It allows the animators to be able to move it around and not have to really suffer any kind of a speed penalty.
In the wider shots, when you see the brain moving around more, then it's a digital image, and it's Phil Tippett. For the close-ups, it's ADI. It was difficult because you had to match them so that that you would not feel a difference between the colors and the sliminess and all these things. So it was pretty tricky work to make the ADI stuff fit into the wider shots.
We sculpted him out of a urethane foam. It was a lightweight foam, and it was a good thing to do instead of going with clay. Clay requires heavy armatures and tons of clay when you get to something as big as that. And ultimately, from that lightweight foam sculpture, we made a giant multi-piece fiberglass mold to produce the inch-thick skins, foam latex skins. We had to break it into pieces, and then once the foam latex skins were made, we had to stitch it all together over the core of the brain bug and then patch it. Simultaneous to that, mechanizing was going on. And the great thing about the brain bug was that it was so huge, we could put puppeteers inside of it. So we were able to fit 5 puppeteers inside there. They did some manual operating of eyes, for instance, and the mouth. The stinger that comes out and sucks people's brains out was in part manually controlled. In addition to that, there was a lot of servo actuation of little feelers and feeders and things. What was great about that brain bug was it was such a non-anthropomorphic face, and yet we had to get a performance out of it. We had to make it look scared, we had to make it look imperious, we had to make it look frightening. And that was a challenge, to have 5 people inside and a couple more people outside and coming up with very specific counted out, performance beats that would give that look.
In a word, disgusting. We had to take Patrick Muldoon's head cast, two expressions. We did one sort of a grimacing looking face for the impact of the palp stinger hitting the head. There's a cutaway, and then we switched out puppets, and there's a brain-sucking puppet that we had built. And with that one, we had to work with ADI. They provided the palp stinger for us, and then it was all hollow and painted. We had to run, essentially it was like, you know, those wiener dog things, or wieners that are all in a string. It was that. It was like, except it was brain matter all kind of strung together in a string line that we mounted inside of our puppet and pulled it through their stinger and all the way out. While that was happening, we also had a mechanism inside that actually sucked the eyes back in, as if there's so much pressure from the brain bug, it was sucking out, you know, eyeballs and tongue and everything else that's in the head.
It's afraid!